Welcome to another episode of Live Lunch. We are so sorry that we have been away from you for the last 2 weeks. That is at least partly to do with the fact that I've been off. I've had COVID. But here I am today. Johan is not here, very sadly. But we will persevere without him. And we have been adequately supplied with some wonderful food from Kokoro. I don't know how to pronounce it. Someone write in and tell me how to pronounce that. But it is lovely. And it's Christine's favourite.
Yes.
Katsu curry. So Christine was coming back and we got it in for her. So welcome to my lovely guests, Christine and Stephen. Thanks you so much for being here as well.
Thanks for having us.
You know what we thought we'd do? We thought we'd go and dive in, because we've been away, we dive in over for 2 weeks worth of material and look at the whole of James chapter 3, because Stephen, you spoke on it last week, I spoke on it the Sunday just gone, and there is so much in this wonderful passage for us to dig in. And it's kind of all about speech. It's all about wisdom. It's all about the heart and that's where speech and wisdom and, it gets played out and that sort of thing. So that is the topic for today. So we're going to dive in a minute. But we're also having a discussion about Stephen was talking last week a lot about how what you say and that can get you in trouble and the way you communicate. It's not just about what you say. You said it's about what you might type.
That's it. It's not just controlling your tongue, but also controlling your thumb.
Oh, there you go. Memorable. And I learned that you could, last night, I don't know if you know this, but you can personalize gifts. Christine, you're a big gift sender. I don't think you are. You're not sending that money to me.
No, I just use words with you.
Yes, you do use words very well, often with me. But you can personalise gifts on WhatsApp. Stephen and I send a lot of gifts to each other.
We do.
And
often Seinfeld based.
Yeah, and I was really amazed to find that you can write on the GIF and then send it on WhatsApp. Anyway, you get that for free, throwing it in. That's a bit of wisdom right there. But let's talk about the Bible, because that's much more edifying for us. Stephen, give us a little rundown of what you were talking about last week from the first part of James chapter 3.
Great, yeah. So James chapter 3 really dives into one of the three main themes that James wants to talk about in his letter. So he talks about facing trials up front, but he talks about these three areas, looking at worldliness, looking at caring for the poor, and looking at how we use our tongue. Those are one of the three main things he does. And right in chapter 3, he's really going deep into that subject around our words, our speech, our talk, our tongue. And I said in my sermon that on face value, it could look like James is using lots of exaggeration and hyperbole to talk about the tongue, but in reality, he's not. He's just helping us face the reality that the tongue is powerful, the words are powerful, and really from the case he's making is it's very destructive, and it's very difficult for any one person to harness, use that word kind of bridle, and this little thing in our heads causes all kinds of pain in our own lives, the people we love, even on the world stage. Things that people say and do, putting ideas out there into the world, can cause massive pain and destruction. And what hope have we to actually solve that? Basically none is the answer, without Christ, without Christ redeeming our words and helping us. We looked at the key theme about the fact that it's a restless evil, and how do we calm restless evils? Well, we find rest, and that doesn't mean taking a holiday. That means finding rest in Jesus. And when Jesus is in the boat, he calms the storm in reality, and then from that place, actually, we can then know that we can use our words not just constructively to bring life, bring the gospel into people's lives and our own lives as well. We're talking a bit beforehand, even self-talk as well as to others as well.
Great. And then I was picking up from there really in terms of the second half of the chapter where it talks about wisdom, and these two things are very connected, aren't they? Speaking, but also wisdom, and they run right the way through James. And I think in one sense what connects is the contrast between wisdom from above and earthly wisdom. And one of the main points I was making on Sunday was that James wants to get to the heart. We can pursue even good wisdom, but in a wrong attitude, in a wrong way, that actually is destructive and unspiritual, and it's to do with the heart. And I think that connects in with the words, that our words come from our heart. Our words reveal our heart, sometimes in ways that we don't want it to, but actually it's demonstrating of what's going on, whether there's pain or whether there's frustration or whether there's unrighteousness. That will come out in our words. But on that, Christian, I wanted to ask you first of all, help us to understand this idea of the heart, because James talks about it, Jesus talks about it. It's a biblical idea, but when we read that word heart in our English translations, it might not be quite exactly what it's being referred to, like what we understand. What would be the biblical understanding of the heart when we come across it in our Bibles?
Yeah, well, it's very different to what modern people think of as the heart. We often think of it as, or talk about it as being the seat of our emotions.
Yeah.
So when we fall in love, we have lots of heart symbols, Valentine's Day, all that sort of thing. But in the ancient world, the heart would probably combine what we consider to be the brain and the heart together. Right. So it's kind of all your rational thought, your will, your emotions. It also has a physicality of its own. We all have a beating heart, but really it's kind of like the core of a person. Yeah. It's all of who they are.
Yeah. So it's not just feelings, it's much more. It's much,
And actually I think the thing that we miss is that it's to do with the will as well. We tend to think of the will as being seated somewhere else, don't we? It's kind of an intellectual thing. Whereas in the ancient world, the heart would be the seat of the will as well. Okay,
so the will is like what we want and what we're going for. I guess on that, in that the passage I was talking about on Sunday, that will, that ambition, and it talks a lot there about selfish ambition, and I think that's wrong. So What would we think in terms of, can ambition be redeemed? Is it good to have ambition, or is ambition always going to be selfish, always going to be problematic for the Christian? What do you think?
I think absolutely you can be ambitious for Jesus. Okay. And I think, if anything, Jesus talks about that. I think when he talks about the parable of the talents, if anything, the person who wasn't ambitious is the one who gets rebuked by Jesus. Actually, there's something about God has given us desires and gifts and talents, words and wisdom, and then we should be ambitious to use that for Jesus. We should be those who are courageous. And often we're not courageous either because we can be lazy, or because we're foolish, or because we're scared. And I think they actually know those who are courageous can be courageous with wisdom and that kind of stuff. I think it's difficult. I felt very convicted during your message, thinking, some of the things I thought were maybe godly, and maybe there are tinged, maybe they have got mixed motives. And I think we live in that place where, are my motives pure in this? I want to be ambitious about this, but is it really about me? Is it about God? Even if somebody works in ministry, my job is to serve Jesus in the church. Yeah. But, there's definitely bits of me that come in there as well. And so navigating that's difficult. Maybe you can pick up.
Yeah, I think preparing the message as well. And I think reading right the way through James and taking our time in it as we are, that thing of selfishness, and just James absolutely, it feels like to me, taking an axe to it's just selfishness being so anti-gospel. And I think I definitely recognize things in myself, things that I want from life, things that I feel I should have, like a certain amount of money or a house or that sort of thing. That it's not that those are wrong things to have, but I know myself the ambition to have that can be mostly a selfish one, right. And that doesn't mean God doesn't want to provide good things for us, but that it can come from that place of actually it's just selfish. It's just selfish. I just want this so my life's more comfortable.
I wonder if chapter 4 talks about this. Yeah. And that's what we're going to come to. It talks about quarrels and fights because your desires are at war within you. I think that's where it's going to come. Lots of this will come out there. I think.
It also says in that bit where it's talking about bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, don't boast and be forced to the truth. Yeah. And I think when we're questioning ourselves about whether our ambitions are selfish or not, these would be the kind of indicators. And let me say about boasting that we may think, I don't boast, but actually we can even boast to ourselves, can't we? Look at how well I've done, or that kind of thing.
I'm really good at not boasting.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And it talks about and being forced to the truth. So I think that's a measure, something that we can think about. Well, how does this ambition sit with the Word of God? Yeah.
So I guess one of the we want to have ambition, but connect it with wisdom and connect it with submissiveness to Christ. And so it's not a selfish ambition, but it's actually a good ambition. So we're saying, you can be ambitious. And probably, I don't know what you think about this. Often Christians aren't ambitious enough. Like we probably have a false humility. I'm not one to speak, because actually it's lack of faith. Jesus said, when I come, who's going to have faith? There's going to be faith on people actually step out in faith, actually, and can try stuff and risk failing and putting God to the test in terms of like, God, you've got to be with me, pushing yourself out your comfort zone in order to see God come through and see test His promises that He is with us and that sort of thing. We can be. So we want to grab hold of wisdom. Can I ask that what is wisdom? Again, it's like what is the heart? But we can think it's one thing. I talked about Sunday how, in one sense, a very true sense, Christ is the wisdom of God, and the Bible in many places talks about makes that direct connection. But maybe let's explore a little bit more what is wisdom more generally as well. How does a Christian walk in wisdom? What are we talking about when we're saying wisdom? Go on, Kristen.
Should I start? Well, it's not just about knowledge. I think we tend to equate the two. It does involve knowledge, but it involves having the judgment to use that knowledge well, and that kind of judgment and knowledge together will produce behaviour in us, and it will depend on where we're getting our wisdom from, what that behaviour is like. So if as Christians we want to have our wisdom based on the wisdom of the Bible and who Jesus is himself, and then that should impact our behaviour.
And how do we do that then? Because I talked as well in a general sense about we get wisdom from the Bible.
Yeah.
But it's possible to read the Bible and not be any wiser. It is possible to understand what it says. So how do we get that shaping from the Bible and get wisdom?
Yeah, I think both Psalms and Proverbs beginning of Psalms and obviously the Proverbs talk a lot about wisdom, and I think and really encourage us to get hold of it. Get hold of it. For your life's sake. That's what's going to keep you safe and cause you to be fruitful and that kind of stuff. And a lot of that is around the Bible. I think we laboured that point on Sunday. I think we must keep labouring that. Yes. You can't have biblical wisdom unless at least read it. You're right. You can read it and it not go in. James talks about that. It going in one ear and out the other, looking at it and then forgetting it. But at the very lowest level, you got to read it. But then you read Psalm 1, it's like meditating on it. As you meditate upon it day and night, you're like what? You're like a tree planted by a stream. That the leaves don't wither, and you bear fruit in season. But it's that sense of really getting into it and meditating it. And letting it kind of, I guess, wash over you. It impacts your words, impacts your actions. So I think, okay, what is this actually? I always pray. Every time I open the Bible, I'm always like, God, what do you want to say to me? What's this going to tell me about you? If we're talking about getting Jesus, His wisdom, but also, what does this mean for my life? And just again, seeing the heroes of the faith, they asked for wisdom, and Solomon asked for wisdom. Like, God, give me wisdom. And no, that's the Holy Spirit coming together, using the Scriptures, helping take situations in your life, and just bringing God's will to bear on it. I guess what it is, isn't it? It's God's will in a situation. Which often doesn't look like wisdom to the world. There's that verse that says, the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. There's lots about Christianity. It's absolutely foolishness to the world. They wouldn't say it's wisdom. They say it's anti-wisdom. But God's wisdom is something different. It's something other. And that brings His kingdom to bear.
Yeah, and in that, when that is the case, it does really require faith, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To actually believe that this is wisdom. When the Bible calls us to live in a way that is counter to the way that everyone else is living, it takes faith to actually trust it. I think that's part of getting wisdom is trusting that the Bible's word is good and is life and is true, because it's not obvious, and it's in the sense that it's not obvious, even in the sense that we might suffer for that, to have an opinion that's out of step with the rest of the culture, to make decisions about not doing that or not going there or saying no to that person or not taking that job opportunity or earning less money or raising your children in a certain way.
Or telling the truth.
Or telling the truth.
Sometimes on the surface, like, actually a white lie here feels like this will be easier.
Yeah.
God's will say, no, you tell the truth no matter what. And that kind of sense of it's like, it might make it difficult there, but not realizing actually, but what your heart's doing and being right with God, that's much wiser than your situation being better right now. Or I always think giving money to the church.
Yeah.
for anyone looking, think, why would you give? I mean, people give thousands upon thousands of pounds every single year into the church. Think, why would you do that? Do you know what I mean? You could spend that elsewhere, investing elsewhere. But because, as much as we say thank you to you, we know for you that is wisdom for your life. Yeah. That is a better stewardship of your funds than keeping hold of it or spending it elsewhere. Because that's treasury in the life to come. But also that's faith in terms of God taking care of you right now. That's looking after your heart.
And the reason we can have that faith is because God is good. And we won't know that unless we are reading his word and reading his dealings with different people. And you see, even when they blow it or they go through really difficult things, you think, what's God doing in this? But you see the overarching story of what God's doing, and you see his gracious dealings and the fact that he's steadfast in his love and mercy towards us. Is we need to know who he is in order to put our faith in him, don't we? And that comes through primarily through reading the word and studying it. And I know I can, especially when you become more familiar with the Bible, almost interpret it in a way that's loses some of its radicalness. I think that when you read James, the radicalness of what it means to follow Christ is there. Like, if you're honest with it, it is there and it's challenging. But I think part of reading the Bible and getting the wisdom from it is recognizing that it is going to challenge and it is going to and if we're reading it in a way that feels very safe to us, we're probably guarding ourselves too much against what what Christ is actually calling us to live like. Going back to what I was saying about the selfishness thing. I believe a question has come in on Instagram, so let's go to that question. Let's hear it.
Yes, it has. The question is, how do we strive for excellence without ambition becoming unhealthy?
That is a great question, because you kind of...
Do we need to repeat it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll repeat. How do we strive for excellence without going into selfish ambition? So I guess we were talking about that a minute ago. Question. Of you're saying, you want it. It's not wrong to be ambitious, but there's going to be a fine line between sort of excellence and perfectionism. And how do we know? And does that person need to be constantly checking their motive and checking themselves? That can be quite a wearying thing. Like, how do we do that?
I think you do need to constantly checking yourself, constantly asking questions, and let other people ask you questions as well. And so not in a wearying way, but in a trusting way. Like, God, I want, with what you've given me and what's in front of me, I want to do excellence is a funny word, isn't it? But I want to do things well, and and I want to have we often talk about prayer. We want things that are impossible. We don't want things that we can just do in our own power. We want something greater, and so there's a sense of trusting God and going for something even better. So I think going for that, but doing it restfully, but resting in God. But I think constantly asking questions. I love the prayer exam at the end of the day. I go, what today in my heart, which doesn't match up with what you want. Where have my desires overtaken what you actually want? And I think that's the way to do that. I think that's that's wisdom and ambition. I think that's the same with the words as well. These are things. Now James is mentioning them, and because there's something that believers have to deal with all the time. He's writing to believers who have to wrestle with wisdom, have to wrestle with the tongue. It's not something you get sorted and then move on to the next thing. These are the daily things. And same with ambition. It's our work, it's our life, it's our whatever it is. Yeah,
I think also what I would say is that our motives are mixed a lot of the time, aren't they? I think you mentioned this before. I think what I find, so take even Sunday, even preaching, and you're up there and you're speaking to people and you're in your preparation, that sort of thing. You want to do it well. I know in me there is a mixed motive. I want to do it well to serve people, and there's a part of me that wants to do it well so that people see that I've done it well. And in one sense, I can quite escape from that completely, and part of it is like, well, should I just not do it then? If there's a part of me that's like, oh, you just wanted to do this well so people think you're good at preaching or whatever, but I think for me that's part of what it is. Faith is like, God, I know my motives are not completely 100% on this. I know my heart is not pure completely on this, but I'm just going to offer it to you and God help me, but I'm still going to do it. And I think probably that relates back to what we're saying with the ambition thing and with the Christian attitude. I probably think, maybe this is a bit controversial, there's more of a danger of Christians not doing something, not saying what should be said, not serving and loving and pushing out their comfort zone because I might do it with the wrong motive. Is that I think God can deal with our motives as we're doing as well. So I think if it's a case of, well, you want to do something for Jesus, but you're worried that your motive might not quite be right, I would say, yeah, you should reflect on that. You should pray about that. You should, say sorry to Jesus about that. But I think also we've got to watch out that the enemy wants to get in and says, no, you're only going to do it for yourself. And there's part of that that's not true, that's a lie, but that we can easily believe that. Yeah. I don't know if you believe what I say.
I'm going to say, I think I just have the opposite issue. And so I think yes, absolutely. There's some people listening who are going to need to hear, hey, right now that's a reason to hold back. There's plenty of people I need to hold back more. Actually, I need to stop and assess my motives better before I go for something, and probably do less. And there's other things. I think some and some, and I think maybe when it comes to being ambitious for God, I think maybe you're right. But there's probably other areas in life where people they probably just need to tone that down. That actually, God, what does He actually want me to do and do?
Yeah. The thing is, God.
I don't know if I've articulated that well.
No,
sorry.
That makes sense. Go on, Chris.
Well, God knows us, and when a man came to Him and said, "I believe, help my unbelief," and it's the same, isn't it? It's the same kind of thing. It's like, help my selfish ambition. I want to be ambitious for you, and God is so much bigger than us and able to use us in whatever way He wants to. So it shouldn't hold us back. But I think there's that verse about doing all you do to the glory of God. And I think that's, whenever I do anything, one of the things I sort of pray about is I really do want to do this for you. Yeah. And I think that, it's, and I'm not perfect. I don't do that all the time. I know I don't. But I think it's having like these little check phrases that just help us to just stop and think. Yeah. I think so often we're just on autopilot, but we need to stop and think. Stop and think before you speak. Yeah. Stop and think. Is this the right track? Is this glorifying to God? Is it going to please Him? Is it going to serve others? Because so often we do things to serve ourselves. Yeah. If we're really honest about that.
Yeah, and I think we're doing things. I think I think just knowing ourselves, listening to ourselves. There's a lot of pattern of like, how well am I going to do in this? Or when for things like preaching, coming off your anything like this, you come away thinking, how well I did. If there's a lot of that going around your head, think, okay, God, this clearly is more about me than you, and just be able to stop and say, hey, let this not be about me. Use my words, despite my mixed motives. It's those kinds of things, or whatever it is. Just to slow down enough to say, okay, I acknowledge there's something going on here that's me, and it needs to be less me. I find like my prep. If I start thinking, what's Matt going to think of this particular point? No, I'll definitely go there. That kind of thing. Think no, that's not my main goal here. I mean, it's like, Jesus, what do you think about this, and how is this going to help people? But that's why I mind go there. It's like, it's not not accepting that I might be a bit like that. It's like, well, there is some acceptance, but it's more saying, okay, that's a moment to check it again.
Let me throw in another practical question that I think is relevant to this, on a slightly different one. Chris, you were talking there a little bit about when we speak, checking our motives, having that sort of safeguards in place and that sort of thing. Yeah. And we've been talking about wisdom, we've been talking about speech and that sort of thing. Social media is all around us. For a Christian, though, is that something you should be engaged in, or yes or no? If so, how? Because that's probably an area that some people are quick to speak. Some people don't want anything to do with it because they know it's like the talk often on social media can be unhelpful and that sort of thing. How do we navigate that as a Christian? Should Christians use social media? I'm talking about, Facebook, Instagram. That we obviously use on Instagram right now, so that helps to answer the question.
No, don't use it. Shut it down.
Unless you're preaching about the Bible. How should we do it? Is it a good thing for Christians to be involved in social media, or should we is the radical option just being like, well, there's so much bad talk on there, and there's so much destructive stuff that I'm just going to stay away from it completely? What do you think?
I think you've got to apply the same verses and principles we talk about in face-to-face speech with social media. In reality, I think where it talks about where there's lots of words, there's more sin. I think the more you're on it, the more you're posting, the more, and particularly interacting around things with other people, the more likely you're going to get yourself in trouble. And obviously, the obvious thing with social media, you lose a lot of nuance. It's very soundbitey, that kind of stuff. If it's quite polemic, all that kind of stuff. So you've got to there's just loads more wisdom that's needed with social media. I think doesn't mean it's totally wrong, doesn't mean bad. I get it when people are like, I just don't go near it. I do get that. I personally have a kind of try and just. I think over the years I've used it less and less and less, and I'm much more clear about why I use it and those kinds of things. Yeah. But I think when you take these words, it's not just about our tongue, it's about our thumbs, and that those things are out there too.
And I think that people often mistake what it is for. It's not an intimate conversation with one other person. Okay. It's public. Yeah. And there are things that we would say in public, and there are things that we would say one-to-one. And I think where a lot of the problem comes is where people confuse those things particularly, I'm on Twitter, and I see a lot of arguments and nitpicking over just small things and accusing people of all sorts of things. And I think, it's not a godly way to behave with people. And this is amongst Christians primarily. But I think they just forget that, there is a time and a place for saying certain things, and you have to get the right place.
Yeah, I think... getting caught up in just stuff like that doesn't help. One of the verses I just love in the Bible, Philippians 4, it says, "Let your gentleness be evident to all." It's basically my life verse, because I'm 20 years into trying to apply it and still grappling with it. Another translation is, "Let your reasonableness be evident to all." And I think if you can just apply that in all your speech, always just seasoned with grace, humility, gentleness, reasonableness, you can't go far wrong with that. If that's your motivation. So I think there's that in terms of the sin of words. I think when it comes to, obviously mentioning social media and selfish ambition, so much of it is just promotion, presenting your best life, all that kind of stuff. Again, just looking at those motives. I want to share with people things that are special in my life. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's, if I meet up with friends, I tell them about lovely things that happen that week, and I think, Instagram or whatever, platform you're on, some of that is actually, that's fun and good, but as long as your motivation is not like I'm trying to airbrush my life, when that stuff starts happening, you're a bit like, oh, what's going on there? Yeah.
Well, there it is. Be careful how you post. Be careful how you gif. Do it all for the glory of Jesus. Maybe that's the note we should end on today.
Sounds good.
Any other final bits of wisdom? Or should we just say thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week as we continue into James chapter 4 next week.